Hello, everybody, and welcome to the premiere edition of Behind the Mic on Amateur Sports TV. I'm your host, Jonathan Hodson, and I'll be here with you every Friday night at 6 Pacific, 9 Eastern, talking to the best sportscasters from across the sporting landscape. This evening, we have a real treat for you. A mentor of mine, a personal friend of mine, and somebody who will be very well known across the hockey landscape. Peter Loubardias will be joining us here in a moment. We'll talk from his experience across junior hockey, from the Memorial Cup, the Regina Pats, the SJHL with the Estevan Bruins, and of course his latest stops in the NHL, most recently with the Calgary Flames. The intent here is to, of course, entertain, which will be no problem with the stories that will be coming from Lou, but also to hopefully be a little bit of a learning resource for the fellow broadcasters looking to pick the brains of the best. So we're going to throw it to another break here, and we'll be right back with Lou on the other side. And welcome back to Behind the Mic. I'm your host, Jonathan Hodson, joined now by a good friend of mine, and I'm sure everybody else will know him from his various spots around junior hockey in the NHL, Peter Loubardias. Peter, thanks for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure, my friend. I'm honored to be part of the maiden voyage.
It's an absolute treat to have you on. And when we promoted on the ASTV social media pages that you were going to be the first guest, there was multiple messages from broadcasting colleagues in different places about the stories that you were going to bring. And honestly, every visit between the two of us is the same thing. So really looking forward to this.
Me as well. Me as well.
So where are you joining us from today?
I am from my off-season home and my true home in Mississauga, Ontario. So that is where I hang my hat with my wife and my stepdaughter when I am not in Calgary, where I spend the hockey seasons. And when I'm not in hockey season mode, I'm in personal life mode. So in COVID times, I've it's been a real blessing for me, actually, Jonathan. If in these very uncertain times that have been very difficult for everyone, I've had more time this year at home than I have for the last decade, and I've really tried to take time to reflect, to be grateful, and I don't take it for granted in my world. I'm not often in the same place as the majority of people that I love the most. So this is it's been a bit of a blessing for me in that respect.
Yeah, I suppose there's two sides of the coin to that, where I'm sure sportscasters and of course athletes are kind of creatures of habit to a different extent, where you're used to the same yearly routine, getting ready for the season, that kind of thing. So it must feel a little bit weird to have your yearly clock thrown off.
I can't get over the fact, it's funny, when COVID first broke out, in the middle of March, for that little time, it seemed, just because that's how my life is, that, we'd get to the middle of April, or if the Flames make a bit of a run or some junior hockey responsibilities, generally I'm home, at the end of May. So being home a little earlier than normal didn't feel quite that odd at that particular time. But then I went back to work for the NHL playoffs and went back to Calgary and, spent the better part of 6 or 7 weeks doing that, then returned at the end of August. So, Jonathan, the long-winded way of saying this does not feel like November one little bit. So, yes, I think when I came back, my clock, definitely the last couple of months, it feels very thrown off, because right now I should be, you know, in the second month of the National Hockey League season. And, you know, before too long, maybe a few weeks from now, I will be going back at a very strange time.
Well, one of the things that I've run into in my writing for different places is writers kind of get used to the same type of terminology when you're writing. And one of the very common things when you're writing about hockey in the off season is the off season is the summer. So there's been multiple times where I've referred to the off season as the summer and had to go, wait, we're November.
Yeah, does hockey actually have an off season anymore?
I don't think any of the sports do.
They almost really don't. In you know, the not so much even the social media era, but, you know, ever since we put smartphones in people's hands, that part of the world seems to have made it a 365-day-a-year business. Although, as we've already talked about, you know, this year in so many ways, I think, has put everyone's worlds in some very different type of perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about perspective, and that's why you were an easy choice for the premier guest, is because I remember back to when you and I met, and it wasn't through hockey, it was through baseball. And you did a few years of play-by-play for the Western Major Baseball League. And I remember when that came out and your name was on it, me personally not knowing you yet, I thought, hey, NHL guy, this will be pretty cool to meet a guy who's done some things and worked some of the same games. And by mid-season the first year, you and I were just having preseason chats about life and family and all that. And that's the most important thing about this time right now.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I think for all of us, certainly myself, it's been an opportunity to, you know, really think about what matters the most in your world. And I'm a very passionate, you know, looking for the next step, the next game, the next season type of person, and have always been very much driven that way. And, you know, I have no trouble saying this to you or anybody else. You know, I've been at this crazy radio and television racket since the middle of July in 1984. And, you know, one of the things that I've finally stopped is, you know, it's a very turbulent time in our world. And to be honest, Jonathan, it's a turbulent time in our business. Things have changed, but I've really tried to use COVID as a time to think about a couple of things. And that is, I can't even believe what 36 years in this business has brought me. I can't even come to start telling you about all the amazing people, including yourself, that I have met on this unbelievable sports journey. And at the end of the day, what I've come to learn probably more than anything, and through a couple of different and unique situations, including one that was the hardest thing that I ever had to go through, a firing in 2011 from Sportsnet Television, that as much as it's about, you know, the games and the next championship and the next night or the next broadcast, it's about the people. And what I am so grateful for in my world, and there are very few exceptions, is when you get to do something that you love for a living, and you get to do it with so many people that you know, enjoy doing it with, that to me is when life is at its best. And so for me personally, I've taken some more time in the last year to just be even more grateful and thankful and thoughtful, I hope, about all the people in my world that have made such a difference. And I could have never done one iota of what I've done in my career without the people.
Yeah, one of my perspectives that I've really adopted in the last number of years is the perspective of passion for the games, but love for the people. And I think there's a distinction between those two. Well,
I should have had you teach me that many years ago. And I think I've I think I've always had that perspective for sure, because, you know, frankly, my love of sports and love of games and my passion for it, you know, is frankly given me everything. It really has. But you're right. As the years have gone by in my life in particular and my career, you understand that it's not about anything really more than the people, because without good people, we could live anywhere we want. We could do jobs that we love. But if you don't have the right people on that journey, then it's not the same. So I love that line, and I may get a t-shirt with it on it. Yeah.
So one of the things that a lot of people compliment you on, and a lot of people notice, myself included, was the enthusiasm and the passion that you bring to whatever you're doing. And it doesn't matter if it's the Flames, the Oilers, the Mem Cup, or if it's the Western Canadian Baseball League. You bring it every single time, no matter where you are. What does what we were just talking about with that perspective, does that feed into you treating any assignment, any level exactly the same?
Yeah, it does. It does. And, you know, Jonathan, you know, as time has gone on, one of the things I feel really fortunate about is, and, you know, you got to know me back in the early 2010s, which is odd now because we're into 2020. And I can't properly explain. There is nothing like live sport for me. There's nothing like being a part of either watching it, broadcasting it, you know, back in my younger days, playing it. It's a feeling that I can really not get from anything. And I can honestly say, and, you know, it's great that we're on amateur sports television, is I have no trouble if a 10-year-old softball game breaks out in the backyard, I'm gonna approach it the same way. I'm gonna do the same amount of work, and frankly, more often than not, I'm probably gonna get even more enjoyment out of it, because, you know, I love being able to be in the best hockey league in the world. But in these times, I never want people to forget where that love affair came from. And the love affair didn't start at the highest level with the most prestige and the most money. My love affair came all the way back to, for whatever reason, you know, my parents would tell me when I was 1 and the Hockey Night in Canada theme would come on, there I would go right in front of the TV, no reason, no teaching. You know, I was taken to hockey games and ball games at the age of 3, and apparently, I mean, I don't remember, I'm 100 now, that I just never moved. And there is just sports for me, Jonathan, at all levels. It's been in some ways, you know, my whole story, which we don't have enough time to tell today, and that's probably a good thing. Sports has kind of saved my whole world. It's glued it all together. It's allowed me to have the greatest memories, meet the best people. That happened very young and early in my life with, you know, some of my hockey, a particular baseball coach, women's softball team that I was involved with, the Saskatoon Harmony Centers, between, you know, the ages of 13 and basically 17. So sports and the people that I've been involved with have meant almost everything in my world and growing all that I'm about. But I'd like to be able to explain to you exactly the passion and the feeling, but there's times I'm actually, I don't get it myself. I just know that in certain situations where I'm invested and it matters, it makes me feel like really nothing else can.
And we'll run through some of your career highlights as time goes on. But you bring up Hockey Night in Canada, and that gives us as good a segue as any to a couple of topics that we should probably give some time to today. A few days ago, Howie Meeker passed away, one of the really iconic Hockey Night in Canada broadcasters, four-time Cup champ with the Leafs. What are your, I guess, start off with, do you have recollections of
huge.
His?
Huge as a kid, and what, that was the awesome thing in many ways about growing up when I did is, we didn't have every game at our disposal. So, Saturday nights in my house when I wasn't at games or playing games meant Hockey Night in Canada. And with that, Howie Meeker was a staple, and we've spent the last 5 or 6 minutes talking about passion. Well, when I think about Howie Meeker, that is the number one word is okay, let her go from there. And all his great phrases. But, I fell in love with Howie as I think pretty much everyone else did because of that word, that passion, that love affair. When I watched him on television, that man oozed his love of the sport, and he gave it back to people like me or anyone who was lucky enough to grow up watching. Not to mention on Saturday nights, with that great passion, he was also a teacher and helped me at a young age understand more nuances about the game and how it was played and why things happened the way that they did. So very, very sad at the age of 97, but he had a massive impact, and the love affair I think we all had with Howie Meeker just came from that beautiful, beautiful passion of who he was and how he felt about the game.
In the last few days, I've spent a lot of time looking up old YouTube videos of his old coverage and his old intermission segments with the telestrator and stuff. Yeah. And one of the comments I saw about him was how he would enthusiastically break things down, but you never got the sense that he was angry at a player or that he was mad. Sometimes, and I'm not, not pointing fingers, not grumbling at all, but sometimes there can be a tendency to sound angry when you're critiquing a play or something. And that's something I pick up on a little bit from you as well, where you're all in. You'll talk about what happened, but you never get the sense that you're mad at the player or you're trying to drag the player or anything.
Well, I'm glad that's the feeling that you get. In our business, in a lot of the roles that you're in, and I didn't find this as much, as a play-by-play broadcaster, although you could fall into that as well. But, one of the great learning experiences through the last 7 years about being a color analyst, and I think in many ways, Jonathan, I'm in a position every day during the hockey season where I have to break down and analyze the Calgary Flames. But I've always operated this way. And that is, first of all, I'm not a player, I'm not a coach, I'm not a GM, but I've been around the game, my whole entire life in one way or another. And I've just been so fortunate I always say, I've gone to hockey school in many ways and sports school my whole life. So I've always just thought the best way you can do it, and I feel very strongly about this in regards to, the best leaders or the best mentors, and that is, you can't lie to people. That's really important because they're too smart. But I've always just tried in my analysis to humanize people. So if you're understanding that people make mistakes and that they want to do better, and some nights it just doesn't always go well, I've always said it this way. I think some of the great leaders or the great analyzers or the great friends, great partners, and it's not easy. And for an emotional guy like me, it takes work. at how you walk that line sometimes between being overly critical, telling the truth, but I've always just wanted to constantly remember these are humans that don't go out to make mistakes. They don't go out to have bad nights. Do they have bad nights? Yes. Do we all need to take some responsibility for bad nights? I've had a million of them. I've yet to have a perfect game or a perfect show or a perfect podcast. But I've always hoped that I've come across in a way where you've sounded knowledgeable, but that, and it's a hard thing as an analyst where you're not the smartest guy in the room, because I understand, as much as I love sports, as much as I've been around it, if I was in a different position, there'd be a reason why. And I've felt that way, Jonathan, my whole life. And that is, I always think there's things to learn from people who are better at things or more knowledgeable than I am.
That's a great way to finish that comment. There's always somebody that you look up to. And before we went on air today, I just saw a tweet that you sent somebody about how you look up to Chris Cuthbert. So there's always, no matter how accomplished you are, there's always somebody that you look up to, and there's always somebody that looks up to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Somebody sent out a tweet today, and I almost, anytime I see my name in the same sentence as Chris Cuthbert, it almost it's like take Loubardias out of there. That name doesn't belong anywhere beside one of the greats in our business. But I'll share this because I'd always admired Chris's work, and in 2010 at the Winter Olympics, for a little while, I guess I am again because he's back at Sportsnet, I got to be teammates with Chris Cuthbert, and I'd heard nothing but great things. I'd always admired his work. And I remember him and I, because we were both calling men's games at the Olympics, and I got to know him in the days leading up when we sat and we watched Norway and Switzerland and not, everybody in that 12-team tournament. And I say this about Chris. Chris is everything about our business that I believe in. His work ethic is unbelievable. His passion, his knowledge, and equally as important, I found out at that Olympic Games just what little ego he had, that it was about being the best he could in an incredibly huge role. He treats everyone that comes across him with respect, and that he cares and that he takes out time. He is truly, to me, and there are a few guys in our country that I'd put in that same class, but Chris Cuthbert, to me, is what our business in every way should be all about. And I've said this a lot to my friends and family, getting a chance as somebody who loves his country, as I wear the Canadian Maple Leaf on the show today, to do the Winter Olympics was incredible. And the second favorite part of it was getting to know Chris Cuthbert. And I swear that on my son's life.
So from Chris Cuthbert to another all-timer, especially on the hockey side, last month, Doc Emrick announced his retirement. Did you ever have a chance to cross paths with Doc?
Yeah, several times. And again, Doc Emrick was in a booth about 10 feet from me with the great Eddie Olchuk during those Winter Olympics in Vancouver. So that was 2 or 3 weeks where, again, I got a better chance. I'd met him along the way. I'd covered New Jersey, Toronto playoff series, including, New Jersey's run to the Stanley Cup final in 2001. So, I kind of crossed paths, but it was in 2010 where, again, a lot about, I just know Chris better. Don't really know Doc that well, but I saw the same things. I saw a great broadcaster who always treated everyone with nothing but respect, was so terrific at his craft. You know, again, just the type of people that I think others in our business should try to emulate.
One thing I saw from Doc was he did a daytime talk show on one of the networks earlier a few weeks ago, and after a great just, you know, pull up a chair and listen interview with his stories, he ends it with, hey, if you have any young broadcasters out there who are listening to you who do play-by-play and want some feedback, I'll give you my email and I'll listen to their demos and let them know what I think. That's phenomenal for a guy of his stature to volunteer something like that. But is that the kind of thing that you think people in Doc's place, in your place, is an important part of the job, you know, giving back and serving the people that have been where you were?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and again, to be likened in any way, shape, or form, I'm just not even comfortable with the Hall of Fame types, because I'm the first to admit that I'm not anywhere near that class. But Jonathan, I'm hopeful of one thing, and that is anyone who I've ever worked with, anyone who I've ever been associated with, mentoring probably has been as important a role for me as anything else. Like, I care deeply about our business. I always want to be willing to help young people who are starting and investing. In fact, at some point, I'm actually hoping in another phase to maybe get an opportunity to coach young broadcasters. So that's something over the last couple of years in particular I've thought a lot about. So the best I can, I always try to make myself open and available, because I feel it's part of the, you know, of the business. And I know, you know, when I was growing up and how I emulated all my favorite people, whether it was growing up in the Saskatoon market or other people, like, it makes a huge, huge difference. And it takes so very little to listen, to care, to take out a little time, and it can change the world for people who are aspiring to do some of the things that I've been so lucky to do.
We could go all day on that, but we'll pause for a break. We'll be right back, and we'll go through some of the career highlights of Peter Loubardias when you come right back here on Behind the Mic on ASTV. And welcome back to Behind the Mic on Amateur Sports TV. Jonathan Hodson speaking with Peter Loubardias. Great first block talking about Howie Meeker, Doc Emrick, the perspectives that we have on the bigger picture side of the game. Let's go through some of your path, getting to where you've been. And I think both of us are in agreement that it's more about the journey than it is the destination, and you've had one heck of a journey.
Well, there's there's been lots of stops, my friend, starting in Estevan, Saskatchewan in 1984. We've already talked today about, the Winter Olympics in 2010, being the voice of the Estevan Bruins, being the voice of the Regina Pats, which is probably the most ironic twist of my whole entire life. Moving into the TV side, thanks to my number one mentor, Roger Millions, who I got to know at 15 growing up in Saskatoon. He hired me 3 different times. Could never thank Roger enough, both personally and publicly, for the difference in taking a chance on me in Regina, in Edmonton. He hired me 3 different times. So again, it's about the people, and the journey has been 36 years plus, and lived in Saskatoon, Regina, stop in Winnipeg, years in Edmonton, 8 full seasons or 8 full years living in Toronto. So yeah, it's I can't even believe that it's been quite that lengthy, and it's had a lot of different twists and turns for sure.
So from a skills and experience standpoint, how valuable is that time in junior hockey for a broadcaster as a team broadcaster? I mean, you go through the motion, you go through the experiences in Estevan, in the SJHL, and in the Dub. How valuable is that time?
They're truly those 2 stops. So I spent almost 4 years in Estevan. I spent just over 4 years in Estevan, 3.5 seasons as the voice of the Estevan Bruins. Jonathan, I wouldn't trade those years for anything. I left home at 18 to start the journey. My first goal was to call 1 hockey game. That was first and foremost. In Estevan, I moved from Saskatoon to a small community of 10,000 people. I did everything. I got into sport. I started in news, actually. My first job was in news, which almost ended my career very quickly before a dear friend of mine, Ray Morrison, moved out of the sports job, went to Saskatoon, and then I've done sports ever since. But, I was the voice of the Bruins. We ended up calling softball in the summertime. I coached softball. I played baseball and softball. Didn't really have a huge care in the world outside of just throwing myself in. It's where you make so many mistakes. You learn the good parts, the bad parts, and really got to own my craft. And then, and I can tell the story now. So I grew up in Saskatoon, loving, and I mean loving, the Saskatoon Blades. Do you want to guess which team I disliked the most?
The Regina Pats.
I despised the Regina Pats as a kid. Despised. But in 1988, Roger hired me to come to CKCK Radio, and in September of 1989, I became the radio voice of the Regina Pats. And those 4+ years, calling games in the Western League was unbelievable. It meant so much to me growing up as a kid in Saskatoon. I've always said, and I always will, the Western Hockey League to me isn't just a hockey league. It's felt like a part of my family. So to have a chance to do games in that league, like I said, the most ironic twist was being the voice of the Regina Pats. But the people I met, one of the people I met in my time in Regina, Kelly Rempel, is, in my list of 4 or 5 of my favorite people on planet Earth. Jonathan, those first 9 years in radio, I wouldn't trade them for the world. The only thing that I would trade, to be as honest as I can, is, again, when you're young and you're thinking about the next steps, probably didn't enjoy my last probably year in Estevan as much as I should have, because you're wondering at a certain point, am I going to ever leave? but I'd never change it. And in fact, one of my great ever memories in Estevan was in 1988. I got a call from my boss. The Bruins season was over, and he said, "How would you like to be the voice of the Notre Dame Hounds run in the playoffs?" Well, I think I jumped up and down outside about 100 times. I followed that group all the way to the Centennial Cup in Pembroke, Ontario. The series that I called between Notre Dame, who, by the way, had players, Captain Rod Brindamore, their goaltender was Curtis Joseph. They played an unbelievable 7-game series against the Calgary Canucks, which to this day is arguably the greatest hockey or sports series I have ever been involved in. And we'd need a full show for me to regale all the different games and events and moments and the people that were involved. So, you know, had I left Estevan earlier, I'd have missed that. And I would have never, ever wanted to have missed that.
That's a big key there. Is I've experienced that as well in my younger time in the lower levels. When you're younger, sometimes you think about, you know, going places and when am I going to be somewhere bigger, and then later on it's, gee, I wish I would have enjoyed that a little bit more right where I was.
Well, it's again, I mean, I think for all of us, that's what life is all about, is you know, staying more in the present. And you talked about less focused on the destination, understanding that the destination is important, because if you don't have goals and dreams and hopes and a direction, you know, you're probably not going to have some of the experiences and do some of the things that you always covet to do. You know, every time I meet a young broadcaster, I just, you know, and it's because of my own experience, just enjoy every step. And not unlike the players, I can't tell you how many players over the years I've had tell me that their favorite time in hockey came in junior, not necessarily when it became the bright lights and the money and the pressure and everything that goes hand in hand with sports at the highest level.
So let's talk a little bit about your Memorial Cup days, being the television voice of that great tournament on Sportsnet. What do you remember about being able to call some of those moments?
Jonathan, I was lucky to do it for 8 years. Starting in 2006, I did it for a number of years with one of my closest friends, Sam Cosentino. I have watched every Memorial Cup final since 1973, and I never missed one. And you want to talk about dreams come true, and I always get emotional when I tell this story, but so in 2003, 2004, I found out that I was going to get a chance to call my first Memorial Cup. So did the tournament, unbelievable. I have goosebumps right now. And one of the true, if not the greatest highlight of my career, was for a 4 o'clock start. I got to the rink that day for the Kelowna-Gatineau final in Kelowna in 04. And I sat there. I got to the rink at 12:30. There was nobody there. The lights were off. And looked out at the ice. And I'd done it all week. I'd already called 7, 8 games because there was even a tiebreaker, if I remember right, in that tournament. And I looked out and thought, today you get to be the one who brings this game to the country after watching it every single year since 1973. And that moment for me is just truly one of the greatest moments of my whole entire life. Calling that tournament, growing up loving junior hockey, what a passion it is for me to have had 8 years of being lucky enough to call junior hockey at the national level, to call that tournament, to call the finals of those tournaments. That one, you know, that's just some of the greatest times, greatest memories. And to be honest, not having that anymore has also been, you know, something that I've struggled to not be able to do anymore.
That's great stuff right there. You've also done other things like the Canada-Russia series, and I'm looking at your sweatshirt right now, the maple leaf on the front. That's another thing that we haven't touched on too much yet. Is anybody who knows you or anybody who's listened to you on the radio or on TV, you're one of the biggest proponents of Canadian sports there is.
It's my greatest passion. It really is. And I guess it probably started right there. 1972, Paul Henderson. You know, I was 6 years old when that series started. Having a September birthday, I turned 7 by the time September 28th, 1972 hit, and it was over. Since then, there's nothing for me quite like when a Canadian team wears the maple leaf. And it doesn't matter what sport. It's whether I've been to them, including cricket. I've even attended a Canadian Olympic qualifier for cricket. You know, and which is awesome. We have so many people in our country, you know, that have made their way over from cricket-rich nations, you know, which is only going to make our team better, which is all I really care about. But yeah, Jonathan, I love my country. I feel incredibly passionate about Canadian sports and the people that are involved in them. I don't know how I could ever express what it's given back. All the World Juniors, you know, even recently, last summer, softball and baseball mean a lot to me. Softball's been another huge part of my life that people don't know that much about. And I reference that Saskatoon Harmony Center ladies team that taught me so much, not about sports even, but about life and work and passion and, for me, all the right things. So last summer, I was lucky enough to, you know, call the Women's Olympic softball qualifying tournament in Surrey. And again, another incredible opportunity. Those women, you know, giving up jobs to put themselves in a position to represent their country, and being back around those types of people, and saw 3 or 4 players who were at the event who were part of that Saskatoon Harmony Center ladies team. It was kind of brought my whole life in a huge, gigantic, beautiful circle. So yes, I have incredible love for my country when they play sports, and it really doesn't matter which one.
You referenced the softball tournament you called, and other events, the Mem Cup, the Canada-Russia, the games of the week of the Western Canadian Baseball League. From a broadcaster's preparation perspective, how much different is it to swoop in and call a single game or a short series versus covering the Regina Pats all season or the Calgary Flames all season?
You know what, Jonathan? It's very different. It's very different. But I love it. You know, I love the challenge. I love, you know, even just talking about that softball tournament. So you make your way to Surrey, and I have, you know, some knowledge certainly of the Canadian team, but, you know, every time I go on the air, the one thing that I want people to leave with is that this is not this guy's first rodeo. That, you may not always like my sound or my style or my enthusiasm or how I do it, but I've always just wanted people to be able to say, whether you like or don't like those things, I'm not going to cheat you on the preparation and the work of preparing and being ready to do those games. So yes, there's no question when you follow a team, whether it's the Flames, you know, whether it's some of those everyday situations I've been in, you know, it's an easier challenge in some ways in terms of game to game preparation, because you're always looking for different nuances because primarily you have the same type of audience. So that's challenging in its own right. And then, you know, when you and I got to know one another, I learned really fast about what preparation was again when I did the Western Canadian Baseball League, because baseball isn't quite like hockey in this respect. Guys in that league, they come from junior colleges and different levels and this university and this country and this country. But, you know, that and the softball have been two of, you know, not the most difficult, but probably challenging situations in terms of preparation. But I love that part of it. I love the searching. I love the looking up. I love the template that I kind of build all the time to get myself through. And so I really enjoy that part of it.
And that's a key to it, is you have to enjoy the prep process, and you have to love that, honestly. And something that my day one baseball mentor, it might sound weird to say, but Jared Howarth of the Toronto Blue Jays is kind of like a big brother of mine. Did the Blue Jays for 36 years, 2 World Series with Tom Cheek, and met him through the Okotoks Dogs. And as soon as I met him, put his arm around me, and, you know, was there for me whenever I needed, whenever I needed it. And something he said to me one time was that the real work in calling games comes in that prep process. That's where you do your work, and the game is when you show your work.
I don't think you could put it better. I feel exactly the same. I've always tried my best to be really diligent in the preparation process. And, you know, the older I get too, Jonathan, you just understand that everything that really matters takes work and plan and preparation and commitment and diligence to get anything that you want.
Exactly. And would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about the NHL side. I know amateur sports TV, that's what we like to specialize in, and speak more directly to the up and coming broadcaster. But let's talk a little bit about the NHL side. With first the Oilers for a bit, and now the Flames on a couple of different occasions. How much different was that when you first got to the NHL level, and the different stage, I guess?
Well, I think the great thing for me personally was, you know, the first legitimate lengthy time I spent around the NHL was when I moved to Edmonton and worked at CFRN Television, and so learn more about day-to-day coverage of the NHL as a reporter rather than as a play-by-play or a color analyst. So that was a great introduction to the league. Did a lot of reporting again on the Toronto Maple Leafs in my first couple of years working as a reporter and on the desk at Sportsnet Television. So, you Yeah, and I think those things were incredibly helpful, just to know the process, the athletes, how it was different than what I'd been accustomed to at the junior level. You know, you didn't have the same kind of access that you did at those levels, so that was different. So to have an opportunity to see it from, you know, the reporting side before I was lucky enough to get back into the play-by-play side was a great transition to be around it. I covered 2 NHL Stanley Cup finals in 2001 and 2002. So, you know, those were a couple of career highlights, to be sure, to go through it and see what it was like. And in those cases, you know, the Leafs were good in both those years. So they made it to the conference final one year in particular in 2002. So I spent a lot of that spring at the rink and covering the NHL. So it was a great transition back for me. And then, you know, when I had the opportunity to become the regional television voice of the Flames in 2008, again, I'd done like a dozen games a year for 3 years in Edmonton. So was doing junior, then started doing some pro games in both some Montreal games, some Edmonton games, until it happened for me for the start of 3 seasons in Calgary. So probably the greatest thing, Jonathan, just as I talk it out with you, I always feel like I had all the right steps and all the preparation and all the different levels, that when I was put in certain places, it felt comfortable and it felt right, and it didn't feel too daunting.
And one of probably the call that has had the greatest likes from your Edmonton days, of course, you know where I'm going with this, is the Patrick Stefan Alashemsky play. I guess that leads into a bigger question about how you, when you're on the play-by-play side, how you serve those big moments.
I love this question. When I call games, I don't like to be scripted in any way, shape, or form. I just call it the way I see it and call it how I feel it. And at times that's probably been something that's gotten me in trouble. And yet in other times, I think it's allowed me to take some big moments and do okay with them. So, you know, I was always taught in the early days that you can't really be anybody that you're not. Now, trust me, along the way, there's other people's voices or styles or the way other broadcasters go about their business. But I've just, honestly, in everything I do, I've just tried to be myself. So I feel it, I'm passionate about it, and I let it go from there the best that I can, given those kind of situations. I think anytime you plan for big moments, they don't always come across the way that you want them to, you know. And the one thing, it certainly didn't work out for me to this point, maybe exactly the way I'd wanted, but the great Bob Cole, who is one of my hockey calling heroes, always did one thing for me. He made me feel the game. And so I wouldn't say that I ever tried to emulate Bob. There's only one Bob. But when I call a game play-by-play wise, my hope was that people would feel the game.
That's a great way to put it. In my career, I've spent most of my career in baseball before doors started to open in hockey the last few years, and that's always been my the way I look at baseball too. where baseball especially, it's about feel and it's about emotion. And if you try to, the way I look at it is you try to serve the moment, you try to present what's happening in the moment. You don't try to be the moment.
For all of us, that's a real fine line. It really is. But yeah, it's the greatest advice you can ever give. It's certainly been some of the greatest advice I've ever received. We are not the game. We guide the game and hopefully add a little something to the game. The game is not, we are not the game.
That's good. So you've had the opportunity to do both play-by-play and color with the Flames. How does your game day prep and your in-game experience change in the two different roles?
Well, I'm chuckling and laughing because I've done the color side now for 7 years and feel lucky as a non-NHLer or non-player to be in the role that I'm in. I'm still grappling, Jonathan, with changing over preparation-wise from what I did forever being a play-by-play guy. But that's where having the opportunity that I've had my whole career to talk to coaches on a daily basis, to be around the game, every opportunity I get at a rink to chat with someone in those types of positions, I generally try to take a little something and put it in my pocket almost every day. So they're two very, very different roles. The guys who do it best, and I have lots of my own favorites on the color analyst side as well. And I've also, I got great help because outside of Craig Simpson, who I just never got a chance to work with, whether it was John Garrett or Ray Ferraro or Pierre Maguire, Charlie Simmer, I'm lucky because I got to learn from some of the best people and I think my friend Sam Cosentino, even though he's never done it in the NHL, I think he does a spectacular job. So again, I've tried to take all of the learning from being around those people in that role, combine it with my hockey knowledge and be true to myself. But I'm still, in a sense, preparation-wise, now to me, it's about, I don't have to tell you anymore who gets from point A to point B. I have to continue to challenge myself all the time to watch even more games, listen to the best color analysts, so I can incorporate what I'm not good at, is in quick, simple form, point A to point B as to why what happened just happened.
That seems to be a theme for everything we've talked about today, is taking whatever you can from everybody you meet along your path, whatever it is.
Yeah, I believe in it. I try my best. Some days better than others, I'd be the first to admit. But yeah, when you're as lucky as I've been and have worked and been around and been exposed, listen, if you don't learn a little something when you've had my journey, you only have one person to blame, and that would be me.
One of your biggest things that you bring up all the time is good people. And when I was putting this show together, that was one of the principles behind this show is, of course, we want to talk sports, we want to talk broadcasting, want to be entertaining, hopefully educational, but that's been a theme in my life too. I look at all the people that have helped me along the way. Every single one of them have been good people. And so for this show, it was about more than anything highlighting that. And so that's why you led off for us this week. So many thanks.
As I said earlier, Jonathan, privilege, pleasure. It's it's been terrific to have you in my world, in my life, as part of my journey. And you know, I'll just leave you with this. You know, we've kind of been reminded in our world sometimes about the destination, as you talked about. But if we can all remember where we came from, remember who made the difference along the way, never forget that, and always, when you come in contact with the people that make a difference in your world, let them know, I think this place would be a little kinder and better off.
Couldn't say it better myself. Lou, thanks so much. It's always an absolute pleasure and a treat to talk to you. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on episode number 1, and I can't wait to listen to your upcoming guests.
We'll be right back. I'll come back to wrap it up with our final block here on Behind the Mic on ASTV. And back for the final block here on Behind the Mic on ASTV. That was an absolute treat to be joined by Peter Loubardias here for our premiere episode to talk through his journey from the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League through the WHL on to the NHL. A lot of great perspectives from him there. Hopefully you had some fun with us. Hopefully you learned something. And that's what we look to bring you every week here on Behind the Mic. You can follow ASTV online on Facebook, Amateur Sports TV, on Twitter, Amateur Sports TV, and their website, amateursports.tv. And same thing on YouTube, where you can find the archives of all our episodes. So thanks so much again for joining us for the premiere episode of Behind the Mic. We'll be back next week, same time, same day every week, Friday night, 6 Pacific and 9 Eastern. This has been Jonathan Hodson for ASTV and Behind the Mic. We'll talk to you again next week.